What is private equity? In its simplest forms is people's money going into private companies and then those same people having some sort of control over that company.
What about hedge funds?
If you want to go get a job at a hedge fund, go get a PhD in astrophysics. Well, I tell folks it's easier to start your own venture capital fund than it is to get a job in venture capital. If they're not going to Harvard or Stanford, these types of careers, private equity, hedge funds, and venture capital, you have to be very deliberate as well as thinking about not just it as your next job, but as job number 2, 3, or 4. As the private equity industry continues to expand, there has been an increase in the number of private equity associates applying to business school, as well as growing interest among MBA students seeking to enter the field post-graduation. Today, we're exploring the worlds of private equity, venture capital, and hedge funds, examining what these roles involve and how aspiring professionals can successfully break into these highly competitive sectors. I'm happy to share some of my own experience working in the private equity and venture capital world. Wondering whether business school can help you get there? This is the place to start. Okay, so PE, hedge funds, and venture capital firms, you want to get a job in them. And I tell folks, and I have this conversation a lot, I've worked for startup companies, venture capital firms, private equity firms, all sorts of great, this sort of word salad of acronyms. And the reality is, first take a step back. What is private equity? And private equity, in its simplest forms, is people's money going into private companies and then those same people having some sort of control over that company. So in its very simplest form, it basically means, friends and family putting money into a startup. And then at that point, then maybe it gets a little bit bigger. Maybe it's angel investors putting money into the startup. And then at that point, it gets a little bit bigger. So maybe you have actual investment companies, sometimes called private equity companies, putting money into a startup. And then you get bigger and bigger and bigger. The bottom line is, how do I get a job in one of these things?
And I think it's worth noting that the biggest funds are, you're saying basically there's a chain of private equity, of the actual equity going in. But I think when MBAs think about getting a job at a private equity fund, they're generally thinking of like big global funds,
right?
That
the Bain Capitals of the world,
the Apollos, whatever it might be, that are getting massive amounts of institutional money going in from endowments and even sovereign wealth funds and the like. So so we think about those huge firms.
Yeah.
Are the? I'll give you a softball here. Are these jobs open to anyone, Harold? Can I just walk in as a speechwriter or as a brand manager at Procter & Gamble and expect to get a job in private equity?
It depends on how you define private equity. Let me explain. Okay, getting a job at the Bain Capitals of the world, TPGs, whoever it is very hard to get a job post-MBA if you have not been in a role with those companies beforehand. So you'll look at some employment statistics, something like 17%, I think, of HBS grads go into private equity after they get their MBA. Well, something like 17% are actually coming from private equity. So from that perspective, it is actually very competitive to get a job in these roles. That noted, let me sort of answer it a slightly different way. If you want to get a job in private equity writ large, meaning in the world that takes people's money invested in private companies and then hopefully makes, some serious return afterwards, then that is far easier than you think. And let me tell you why. Because there's 4,500 private equity firms. And there's so many private equity firms that actually people don't even know which one the biggest are and who's the most successful. Did you know the Celtics were just bought?
Yes, I did.
And did you remember the name of the person who bought them?
I don't actually, to be honest.
Yeah, Bill Chisholm, I think his name is. Okay. He runs one of the largest private equity firms in the country, one of the most successful. Have you ever heard his name before?
I actually haven't, no.
No, he was quoted once in the Wall Street Journal. And the quote was something like, yeah, we think it's a good company. And my point here is not that you're going to grow up and be, that guy, but rather my point is, if you're serious about the industry of private equity, there is a place for you. And the place for you is probably in these firms that are actually quite a bit smaller or much more regionally focused.
Right.
So from that perspective, I tell folks, you have to get out there and yes, by all means, interview at some of the top firms. But there's another world here that you have to get out there and get to know.
Exciting news! You can now access On Track by mbaMission for free. Take our 2-minute onboarding questionnaire to personalize your learning path. Choose the free plan, and you'll have unlimited access to our complete modules on MBA application timelines, standardized testing, your professional background, community leadership, school selection, and more. You'll also get access to select lessons from our brainstorming, personal statement, essay, resume, and recommendation modules. It's a great introduction to the On Track platform and will help you jumpstart the MBA application process. Get started today at ontrack.mbamission.com. I think if you want to scratch and claw and find your way in, if you work hard at it, I mean, I suppose it's true of anything, right? If you're absolutely determined to do something and you keep working at it, good things can happen. Right. But if you want to work at a brand name firm, typically you're talking about a brand name firm that recruits on campus or recruits its own, gives return offers. You're typically looking at a couple of schools that have double-digit numbers of people going into private equity, or Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and after that it falls off pretty quickly. Like even Chicago and MIT are in single digits, and so and it tends to be those who are spending 2 years in consulting or 2 years in banking, being recruited immediately before they start their jobs these days into private equity firms, then spending 2 to 3 years in private equity and going into business school, and again, many of them having either return offers or being part of a merry-go-round where they're like, I was at Apollo, I am now going to Madison General. I'm making it up. And so and also like private equity can be these days also family offices and some like even the Canada Pension Plan has a private equity arm that's very,
sovereign
very
wealth
active.
Fund,
and
definitely.
Sovereign wealth funds, exactly.
Definitely. That's harder. But the path there is in itself is not impossible. And what I mean by that is look and see where a Bain & Company consultant goes when they leave Bain & Company. A number of them are going to go off and join a private equity firm. Go and look and see where an investment banker goes after 2, 3, 4 years being an investment banker. MBA, few years in investment banking, which is a far easier job to get than people realize. If you look at some of those schools, you look at some of the schools that are sending people to investment banks, then they can go off into private equity. Right. And again, it's one of those things, you never want to pop anyone's bubble. Right. But I always want to tell folks, if you tell me you want to go to get an MBA, you don't have any background in finance, you want to get an MBA and then go into private equity, again, sure, is it possible? It's really hard. So you have to find sort of either the back door, the alternate route. There are certainly people who go into one size private equity fund, sort of a regional fund, and then go into a bigger fund. That certainly happens. There are certainly folks who go work for portfolio companies, or in the case of whether PE portfolio companies or venture capital portfolio companies, and then work their way that way. Right. So if that's truly your end goal and your career is 40 years, I'm pretty confident you can make it. I really am.
But you're also a very happy and optimistic person.
Right.
But what's so we're talking about private equity. What about hedge funds? Okay. And let's get hedge funds then venture capital.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think first of all these things start getting mixed together. Yeah. So hedge funds, sometimes are private equity firms, sometimes they're not. Hedge funds are very hard, and I'll tell you why. Because hedge funds, you have to go and they're really having a very specific skill they're looking for. If you want to go get a job at a hedge fund, go get a PhD in astrophysics. I mean, that's the type of jobs that they're looking for.
So a hedge fund requires you just to back up, requires you to be extremely analytical.
Exactly right.
Often have like pretty independent theses on where the market's going, or have some like programmatical skill that will allow you to develop something that will detect small differences in between, two stocks or two. That's right.
You're a math major, like no such thing as a dumb math major. It's that sort of thing. But at the same point, there are opportunities. If you want to get into sort of, I would say, the edge of finance, you can certainly go work for private wealth management. You could go in and work somewhere that recruits on campus. Goldman Sachs hires a tremendous amount of people to their asset management program. You could certainly start there, and then at that point, you sort of eventually work for your client, and that would be a hedge fund or something. Right. So,
and like I have a friend of mine who graduated from Wharton many years ago. Yeah. He had he'd done banking and he'd done PE for a prestige firm. Yeah. All he wanted to do was go work for a hedge fund.
Yes.
And this is, a Wharton guy with like brand name PE experience.
Yep.
And he sent out like dozens of letters and stock pitches that were detailed and banged on every door, and ultimately he got one offer from a hedge fund, but that was it. I mean, that's great.
Right.
But it's like they're not always hiring, and they're not always hiring on campus. Like
they're not, and also you have to bring
they tend to be very top heavy, and like some of them tend to have very few people. And so
I mean, that's another thing. Also, there just aren't many jobs generally. I mean, there's always these interesting places you can land. Bridgewater Associates, it's probably the biggest hedge fund in the world. Ray Dalio. They'll frequently hire many different types of people and then sort of slot them in. There are a few firms like that. Bridgewater actually does recruit on a lot of different campuses and stuff. But sometimes, and this is more in the case of venture capital, I tell folks it's easier to start your own venture capital fund than it is to get a job in venture capital. And I sort of believe that.
Well, venture capital is definitely like a really, it's fluky, it's networking oriented.
That's right.
It's like they're not out, they're not actively hiring that way.
No.
They're not just like, hey, we're Sequoia and we're hiring, please apply.
Exactly.
Just send in your, like they get inundated with maybe they do that occasionally at Sequoia because it's big enough, but like the odds of you getting a job,
it's really hard. If you want to work for Sequoia, go get a job at one of their portfolio companies, and you can find the portfolio companies online. I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world. You go in, you take a huge pay cut, you walk in there. I tell people, go to that Series A company where at least you'll get paid something, and at that point you start working there, and you get to know the venture capitalists from the inside. And listen, over time, and again, think about your career for the long term. Over time, actually, you position yourself as a venture capitalist, and I think that's true. Obviously there are different ways to get different places. I think this notion for most people, who are particularly if they're not going to Harvard or Stanford, these types of careers, private equity, hedge funds, and venture capital, you have to be very deliberate. I really do believe you can get to these places, but you have to be very deliberate, as well as thinking about not just it as your next job, but as job number 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, that is true. Like you don't necessarily have to get there on day one. I know we have an impatient group of uber achieving MBAs, but
right.
But sometimes it takes a while to get there.
Yes.
I just remember one applicant who really networked his entire time while he was in school, and was focused. Like, I'm not going to be distracted by consulting. I'm not going to be distracted by banking. I'm just going to get that VC job. And talk to anyone who went to every conference. And like finally, he made it.
Did he get a job?
Yeah. He went to Columbia and he got a job at a very good very good firm. And I should actually look him up. I'm curious how he's doing. But it was. I talked to him after. It was all networking. It was just there just are so few jobs. They're in such high demand. They don't need to come to campus. And be saying, hey, would you like to work in venture capital? Like it's not like they need to compete for talent the way banks or Google might or whatever it is. The jobs are few. People are knocking the door all the time.
That's right.
It's tough.
And listen, you also have to zig where other people are zagging. And what I mean by that is if you want to do healthcare VC, go to Nashville. Nashville happens to be, for reasons that I could explain, but it's too boring. Talk to me, go for your 30-minute consult. I'll explain to you why Nashville happens to be a hotbed for healthcare VC. So if you're interested in healthcare VC and you get sort of serious about it, then go to a place like Nashville. And it is far more likely you'll get a job in healthcare VC in Nashville than you will in Boston. I mean, that's just the facts.
It's so funny. I'm like thinking of this right now. I worked with a woman who worked at a small but prestigious VC firm. And I'm like, they don't recruit on campus. You can't just send in your resume. She actually did just send in her resume, and they're like, this looks interesting. And she did get an interview and did get the job ultimately. But I mean, that was more of a unicorn fluke than anything. So it is possible. But
it is possible.
I think everyone knows that these days, we hired for a social media coordinator, got like 4,000 applications overnight or stuff like that. It's pretty hard to get that job just by being in the crowd. For any job at this point in the competitive industry, you're going to want to start building your network before you get to school. Like you're not.
That's right.
You don't want to be arriving on campus. and saying like, oh, well, now I got to figure out the private equity landscape.
Right.
It's like, or the hedge fund landscape. You're going to be wanting to like cultivate leads before you get there.
That's right. And also these schools have gotten a lot smarter in terms of preparing their students. Kellogg now has this great private equity program, I guess, that actually, in some ways, it's really outstanding. I haven't really seen something as comprehensive as that. Kellogg just started. People who are interested in private equity, go take a look at it. Really, it's like a concentration in private equity. And they not only have some classwork around it, some curriculum around it, but they also have these wonderful connections that they can make to people.
Right.
And we've talked about it on, I think, other podcasts. In actual fact, Chicago is a great city for private equity in a way that Cambridge or Palo Alto is a great city for venture capital, or Austin. And it's sort of funny. And again, a geographic plan of attack or strategy can actually help you get a private equity job or help you get a venture capital job.
Right.
And
that's a good point.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah. No, I think so then.
Have we
exhausted this topic?
Have we exhausted this topic?
Yeah, or exhausted ourselves. There we go.
Yeah. This is a good one. This is fun. I mean, I think this is an unorthodox part of, unconventional. We usually talk about the inputs as opposed to the outputs, but it's important people understand the outputs because it's not all about getting in, it's about getting that job. So thanks for listening. And
This is Harold Simansky and Jeremy Shinewald with the mbaMission podcast. If you want to continue this conversation, please call us, speak to Jeremy, speak to me for a free 30-minute consultation, or any one of other 25 or so consultants.
If you want to be one of our success stories, sign up for a free consultation with a member of our full-time MBA admissions team. Since we've worked with tens of thousands of applicants over the past 2 decades, we can give you our honest opinion on your chances and help you put together your very best application. That is not a sales call, but rather your first session with one of us for free. We can give you a profile evaluation, answer specific questions about the process, review your resume, talk about your school choices, and so much more. Sign up at mbaMission.com/consult. We look forward to working with you.